So apparently America decided, very confidently, very loudly, with the chest puffed out like a guy who just watched one YouTube video about economics, we don't need Canada. That was the line. That was the vibe. That was the tweet energy. And it turns out saying we don't need Canada is a lot like saying I don't need oxygen. You can say it. You can believe it. But the moment you test it, things get quiet and then very bad. Because what we are watching right now is not a trade dispute. This is not a policy disagreement. This is not two countries haggling over lumber prices like they're at a flea market. This is a live demonstration of what happens when arrogance runs headfirst into geography. And geography always wins. Always. You can ignore it. You can insult it. You can tariff it. But eventually, geography taps you on the shoulder and says, "Hey buddy, remember me?" For decades, there has been this weird, lazy assumption in Washington that Canada is basically America's storage unit. A snowy attic where we keep extra stuff. Oil, uranium, fertilizer, aluminum, water, unimportant things like fuel, food, electricity, and national defense. And the thinking was simple. We're bigger, we're louder, we have the consumer market, we have the military, so if we ever really leaned on Canada, they'd fold. They'd apologize. They'd send a polite delegation with maple syrup and regret. Well, as of this weekend, we found out what happens when the polite neighbor stops smiling. 48 hours ago, the president signed an executive order slapping a blanket 25% tariff on all Canadian imports. Energy, lumber, aluminum, minerals, everything. The message was clear: renegotiate on our terms or else. And the White House fully expected Canada to blink, to come down to Washington and say, "Okay, fine, what do you want?" Instead, Canada did something no one priced in. They didn't counter with tariffs. They didn't posture. They didn't tweet. They pulled the lever. They invoked national security powers and said, "We're not taxing exports. We're stopping them." And that's when the panic started. As we speak, valves on major pipelines are closing. Trains carrying fertilizer to the Midwest are stopping at the border. Uranium shipments destined for American nuclear plants are grounded. And suddenly the phrase, "We don't need Canada," is being replaced with a much quieter phrase inside the White House. Oh no. Gas prices in parts of the Midwest jumped overnight. Not gradually, not slowly, jumped. Futures trading was suspended in agricultural markets because no one knows what fertilizer will cost next week. The Department of Energy quietly issued alerts about grid stability, not because of weather, because refineries and power plants are missing inputs. And this is where the lie gets exposed, the big lie, the one we've been telling ourselves for years: energy independence. You've heard it 1,000 times. We frack, we drill, we export oil. America is energy independent. Rah, rah. Sounds great, feels patriotic. There's just one problem. It ignores chemistry. The oil we produce in places like Texas is light, sweet crude. It's thin, it's clean, it's great oil. The problem is, our biggest refineries were not built for that oil. They were built decades ago to process heavy, dirty, sludge-like crude, the kind that used to come from Venezuela, Mexico, and Canada. These refineries are insanely expensive machines designed for one specific job. You can't just switch the input like it's a Spotify playlist. For years now, as Venezuelan oil disappeared and Mexican production declined, Canada became the lifeline. Millions of barrels of heavy crude flowing south every single day. It's the feedstock. It's the blood supply. And when tariffs hit, the White House thought they were taxing a foreign supplier. What they actually did was tax their own engine. And Canada didn't even play defense. They played offense. Because here's the part no one in Washington wanted to talk about. Canada finally built an exit. For years, the U.S. blocked pipelines that would let Canadian oil reach the Pacific. Because as long as Canada was landlocked, we got their oil cheap. It's called the discount. And American drivers benefited from it every single day. That pipeline is now open. And yesterday, Canada announced long-term energy partnerships across the Pacific. Tankers are lining up. The oil isn't disappearing. It's just not coming here. Which brings us to the Midwest, the part of the country that just learned very suddenly how dependent it is. Refineries there rely on Canada for the majority of their supply. You can't reroute Texas oil overnight. The pipes don't exist. The infrastructure doesn't exist. This isn't a pricing problem. This is a physical problem. You can't refine what you don't have. And if you think empty gas stations sound dramatic, wait until you get to electricity. About 1/5 of U.S. electricity comes from nuclear power. It's the backbone, the thing that keeps the lights on when renewables can't. And here's the fun fact no one likes to say out loud. America produces almost none of the uranium it uses. We import it. And after banning Russian supplies, that left one major, reliable source: Canada. The highest grade uranium on Earth. Clean, stable, friendly, until now. Canada just designated uranium a critical asset and paused exports. Not permanently. Just long enough to remind everyone who actually holds the leverage. Nuclear plants don't have infinite fuel sitting around. They operate on cycles. Miss one refueling window, and the plant shuts down. Shut down enough of them, and you're looking at rolling blackouts. And you can't just buy uranium like you buy soybeans. The supply chain takes years. Mining, milling, enrichment, fabrication. Canada knows this, which is why this move landed like a hammer. And then there's the one thing that really makes people nervous: food, potash, the pink salt no one thinks about, the thing that makes modern farming possible. And Canada doesn't just produce some of it. Canada produces most of it, especially what American farmers use. No potash means no fertilizer. No fertilizer means no crops. Miss the planting window and the year is gone. That's it. No second chance. Farmers in the Midwest are staring at empty barns right now, not because they can't afford fertilizer, but because it's not coming. And food markets don't care about ideology. They care about math. Less corn means higher prices. Less soy means higher prices. That flows straight to meat, dairy, eggs, bread, the so-called breakfast tax. And here's the part that really stings. The tariffs were sold as protecting American farmers, and now they're the ones getting crushed. Canada, meanwhile, has fertilizer. Canada has food. Canada has buyers. The world will happily take it, while American farmers wait. For a century, the U.S. and Canada functioned like one economic organism. Goods crossed the border multiple times before becoming finished products. Cars, planes, weapons, food, energy. The border existed politically, not practically. That assumption is dead. Canada is now openly talking about diversifying away from the U.S. because depending on one customer is a security risk. And they're right. They're willing to take short-term pain to avoid long-term vulnerability. That should terrify Washington. Because Canada isn't just a trading partner. It's embedded in U.S. defense, infrastructure, and surveillance. NORAD, radar, aluminum for jets, steel for armor. You cannot replace that quickly, or cheaply, or at all. This is the part where the fantasy of total self-sufficiency collapses. America is powerful, but it is specialized. It needs raw materials. Canada is raw materials. Declaring a trade war with your supplier is not strength, it's self-harm. So how does this end? It ends the way all bad bluffs end, with a phone call, with a quiet exemption, with a sudden temporary pause announced as a goodwill gesture. And everyone will pretend this was strategy, not panic. But the damage is done, because Canada learned something important, and America did too. You can't tariff geography, you can't sanction chemistry. You can't threaten someone who controls your fuel, your food, and your power grid and expect them to smile. We said we didn't need Canada. Canada waited. And then they showed us exactly what happens when you're wrong. If you want to keep up with where this goes next, subscribe. Because the next domino is manufacturing. And what's happening in Detroit right now is going to surprise a lot of people. And if you think this was just about trade, congratulations. You just learned the hard way that in 2026, interdependence isn't a theory, it's reality.